Sophmore Album Syndrome. Is it real?
In some cases.
Certainly in some cases.
In some cases, the sophomore album ends up being more popular than the first album.
Have you noticed a historical trend? Because I tend to find that debut albums on artists from the 60s and 70s were actually much weaker than their second. Typically.
You know, it's been my experience that a lot of... Maybe the second album doesn't sell as well, but the material on it is just as strong, if not stronger, than the first one.
Yeah. And so I've come to this conclusion that in almost all cases, there's this myth that gets thrown around this whole, you got your whole life to write your first one, but you only got 6 months to write your second one. The label's rushing you and you can't make it as good as you... No, because you spend your whole life learning how to write.
Yeah.
So then when it comes to the next one, you've already learned how to write, so now you just need to go to work. Right? You just need to do the work.
Mm-hmm.
And when you do your first album, you do it at such a leisurely pace because there's no pressure.
Mm-hmm.
But you need to be, like, before anybody goes into a multi-record contract, I would always recommend, like, make sure you're prepared to write the next album.
Mm-hmm.
Because that'll be the harder one to do just because all of a sudden it becomes work.
Mm-hmm.
And I just do record by record. I'm not...
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to leech off of people forever. That's not good. But at least, if I sign you do one record, and then if you don't like it 5 years later, you can record the exact same songs and cut me out.
Yeah.
I don't actually think the sophomore album syndrome is a thing. I think it's a byproduct of audience expectation.
Sure. Because, a lot of times you'll want the second album to sound exactly like the first album, but, the artist is matured, the artist has different life experiences.
Progressed.
Whatever. And, so and they already did the first album, so why would they want to do it again? So they put out something different, and the audience is just like, wait, this isn't what we wanted.
Freaks out. Well, and also... At least what I noticed starting in the late 90s especially,
mm-hmm.
All of a sudden the labels, the first album would come out and they would put out a lot of first albums. A lot of people, they would sign 100 bands, 10 of them would get released,
mm-hmm.
and one of those would become a hit. But then that second one, that one that became a hit, they'd offer the second album to.
Mm-hmm.
And then they would spend a fortune hyping it.
Yeah.
So you're going, oh my God, 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 oh my God. Tomorrow's the day. Weezer's got another album. And you're so excited, and you run to the store, and you run to the store, and you run to the store, and you get the album, and it also has a single color. Right? It was the Blue Album. What was their second one?
Pinkerton.
Oh, good. See, that's why you hate it. Why couldn't they just do, like, the Green Album or the Red Album?
See, I loved Pinkerton. Pinkerton's my absolute favorite Weezer album.
You get my point, though, right? But the labels hyped it up a lot.
Sure. And the court case didn't hurt, but...
But all bands that have a first hit get this treatment. And so the audience builds... It's like these video games... You build it up in your mind, and then No Man's Sky doesn't have anything you were expecting.
Yeah, it's you build it up so much, it's never going to be as good as you built it up to be.
And that's where the sophomore album syndrome comes from. It's not a problem of the artist, it's a problem of the audience. And it's really a problem of the marketing.
See, then I come back to Live. Live's first album was good. Their second album is the one where they really broke out. But when I listened to the second album, the only standout songs were the singles.
Well,
now, granted, that album had like 4 singles on it, but that was it out of like 12 songs on the
Well, in
Darn
that era,
30.
that was the standard operating procedure. The reality is that the person who writes the song is going to get paid, and the person who plays the song is going to get paid a lot less, right? So somewhere in the 70s, a lot of musicians figured that out and started writing for themselves. But then by the end of the 80s, and the Police were a very famous breakup with these. If you look at the Police liner notes, they go from written by the Police to written by Sting and the Police. And now all of a sudden Sting's making more money. And all of that money would come from the labels getting the stuff pushed out to radio airplay, and they would get songwriter royalties. So they would spend all of their money and time working on the singles, and then they would just throw together the rest of them.
Sure. But, that's also how Pete Townsend became a millionaire before the rest of the Who. He was the one writing the songs.
Right, and that's why bands break up.
Sure.
So that's why with our contract, we just treat everybody like the band. The band is the band is the band. And ultimately, though, those kinds of things could create internal conflicts. But it's really a problem with the audience. The audience expects too much from an artist on their second album.
But is it a problem with the audience, or is it a problem with the PR machine?
Well, the PR machine is really there to raise awareness. And so if you're talking about somebody's favorite band, you're not going to release you're not going to temper expectations with a press release. You're going to announce. And then the audience will let it run through their head over and over and over until they build up some unattainable
some of the advertising I remember seeing for those albums, I think that was almost guilty of exploiting the hype.
Right.
And that was building it up more than the audience expectations of it. That was just increasing audience expectations of it.
Yeah, but I mean,
if it was just announced and kind of,
have you ever known a company to have truth in advertising? Exactly. All right. So that's my thoughts. Did you have any other thoughts on Sophmore Album Syndrome? I'm saying everything you think you know about Sophmore Album Syndrome is actually wrong, because I've been in the middle of this for so long and I've written enough records to realize, it's not because the label's rushing them. It's because the hype machine and the fandom gets so rabid that there's just no way for it to live up.
Yeah, and that always bothered me, because a lot of these albums are just as good, if not better.
Yeah, I really love Cargo by Men at Work. I really do. If you haven't heard that record, you should go check that record out. It's actually pretty good. It's one of my favorites. I'm really glad I have it on vinyl, even though it's like, the sort of thing you find in a dollar bin. So yeah, what's next?